What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Quadcast, the show where we get real, get raw, and get loud about mental health, substance use, and the fight to take our lives back.
Each episode, we're cutting through the stigma, dropping knowledge, sharing stories, and bringing the heat with guests who have lived it and aren't afraid to talk about it.
So turn it up, lock in, and let's break barriers, spark change, and build a community that refuses to stay silent. You're tuned into the Quadcast, and let's get into it.
You can find us on Patreon, Facebook, Instagram, or email us. The Quadcast is always looking for new guests, whether you're individuals that have experienced it, you're in law enforcement, treatment programs, nurses, doctors, or anyone that just has something to say. Come share your story with us on mental health or substance abuse.
Warning, there's cussing in this video. If you don't like swear words, well, you're
watching the wrong damn show.
So we're here with Timmy Adkins, and I call him Timmy, but he goes by Timmy generally, but his name is Tim Adkins with Summers County Sheriff's Office, and we are going to deep dive into the world of mental health and addiction from a law enforcement perspective and mental health from a personal perspective as well. Timmy, thanks for being on here. And if you just want to take a second and introduce yourself and take us away.
Brother, I appreciate you inviting me on. I look forward to talking about some of the things that you've been bringing up on Facebook. I think it's great. I think it law enforcement officer or anybody else in the first responder field get an opportunity to talk about mental health. I don't think the individual responder gets enough of a platform to talk about that stuff without seeming vain. I mean, you can't really talk about it on your own because then people just think you're trying to seek attention. But man, you giving people a platform to do that, I think it's incredible, and I hope it takes off. But as for myself, I've been a law enforcement officer for 14 years in Summers County. I've been back and forth between the Hinton Police Department and the Summers County Sheriff's Office. I'm currently acting chief deputy at the Summers County Sheriff's Office. I serve underneath Justin Ferris, the current setting sheriff here in Summers County. But yeah, man, I've experienced a ton of different things, good and bad, in my career.
So, Timmy, if you had to wrap a definition around mental health, what would your definition of mental health be?
That's pretty broad. I think your overall perception of reality, how you're affected by it. I think that's a big part of it. Like, I can speak from my perspective in law enforcement, some of the things that you've seen, how that takes a toll on you and how different officers see the same thing, but they just perceive it differently. And, then you flip the script and they see something that bothers them, but it doesn't bother you. So I think it's perception, a lot of it. But over time, obviously, that takes a huge toll on an individual. And I don't care who you are, everybody's got something.
Absolutely. And perspective is a big thing with it. You and I, we've known each other for a long time and got a good background there, and I worked at the same police department for a while when I was first starting out. And there's things that you've seen that I guarantee you I couldn't fathom, and likewise.
Sure. Absolutely.
So from your time, from start to when you first started law enforcement until now, how has that changed your outlook on mental health and substance use issues in your community?
So when I started, I was 19 years old when I became a police officer. I didn't have much life experience. Obviously, didn't understand addiction, the toll that it takes on an individual. throughout the course of my career, especially early on, you're kind of jaded just because you don't understand. You're full of piss and vinegar, and those things really don't register. You're just doing a job, and you're loving a job, and that's it. Um, Throughout the course of my career, though, with personal experiences, how addiction has affected me and my family on a personal level has allowed me the insight to look at people differently and understand that everybody, it doesn't matter how far gone they are as an addict, they are human, just like you and I. Yeah, we may have different vices, but everybody's got a vice, and it's just unfortunate that theirs is hard drugs. So over the course of my career, I've definitely grown more compassionate to people who are addicted to drugs.
I think, that covers it pretty well. I was pretty much the same way. I was 18 when I went through the academy and came straight back out and started running a canine on the street, dealing with drugs all the time, and individuals suffering from substance use or just recreational. And when you go from high school to the police academy to on the street dealing with it, you really don't get the chance to form an opinion about it, because you go from being an everyday civilian to enforcing the laws that are written by the state, and you don't actually get to perceive your own perspective of what is actually happening. So I think with maturity over time comes your understanding of what is actually going on. And we may not actually understand what's going on, but we tend to, I guess, sit back and actually think about things a lot more in depth than we do when we're first starting out, in my opinion. That is, anyways.
Yeah, I think this sums it up perfectly. I think in general, some people are generally compassionate people from the time they're young, and most people are. It's just that they're compassionate to different things. And I think once you grow up and once you lose a little bit, I think that starts to change you. Some people aren't. Some people are lucky and they never lose anything, and then that's the kind of person you usually see is a less compassionate individual. But having those life experiences and job experiences where I've lost is definitely made me a more compassionate individual for everybody, not just the drug addict, for everybody, trying to understand people.
And I think that's one thing that we'll never understand is the human perspective from everybody, because everybody's so different. But it doesn't make it any easier from a civilian side to a law enforcement side understanding people, because there's no true book on it.
No, there's not.
So in your position at the sheriff's office, and we'll kind of switch over to the substance side of things, what on a routine basis are you guys dealing with on a substance issue right there in Summers County?
Here in Summers County, it's mainly heroin, fentanyl, and those two things go hand in hand anymore. And then you'll get your meth. That's it. It's pretty much the run right now.
Are you guys seeing it in the schools at all?
No, not really.
That's a good thing. I know that some of our SROs up here they've been seeing an influx of like THC vapes and stuff. Is that what you guys are seeing?
I don't even consider it's pretty bad. I don't even consider marijuana a hard drug anymore, more than I did when I became a police officer. I think if everybody smoked weed instead of doing heroin, I think the world will be a better place. But Yeah, we've seen THC in the schools. We have seen that.
And I don't think you're wrong at all. It kind of goes back to, we always hear that you'd rather fight somebody that smokes marijuana than drinks alcohol. And that's held true to my standards the whole time.
Absolutely.
It's crazy to see how things have evolved from, I've been away from law enforcement. This is my eighth year after my shooting. So, I mean, I've been away from it for a while. So, it's crazy to sit back and look how things have changed even from then.
And I think that's a very good point too. Your incident, and you didn't really have a choice. I mean, it was taken from you, and obviously, I hope everything's well for you, and I hope you're doing great, and you're in a good place. But you were kind of forced to take yourself out of that position. Obviously, you still think about law enforcement, and you still think about the guys doing it, and your sympathies are with them when things don't go right. And you probably get aggravated just like I do when you read something negative about law enforcement that people just don't understand, and they're drawing their own perception of it. But taking yourself out of the profession sometimes I think is beneficial for us. Don't think of yourself as a police officer so much. Think yourself as, Timmy, the guy. And something that I found out in my life too, when I was younger, I didn't go out. I didn't, try to interact with people as much. But growing up, I've made it a point to disconnect from law enforcement and go out and rub elbows with some people in the community. Not just the higher up people, but the people who are struggling too. And what that's given me is like a sobering experience, and maybe the freedom to understand people on a better level instead of dealing with them on an official level where I have to feel a certain way. I can go out and understand them on a personal level.
And that definitely, I mean, that is true. And because when you're wearing a uniform and wearing a badge, you're perceived as an official capacity at all times. And, I know that I've found myself many times putting that badge and uniform aside, even while wearing it, to try to, comfort that child or comfort that domestic violence victim or whatever, just to give that sense of being just a person and not law enforcement. And that's a big thing that you guys deal with today, and that the whole country deals with today, is putting a face to the badge and putting a different outlook on the badge to the younger generations. And it's hard with the amount of bad and negative news out there, and in a world of AI, you can create anything. So it's hard to even really know what is real and what is fake anymore. What do you guys do as a department to be out within your communities, putting that face with a badge?
As a supervisor, I kind of I take a step back sometimes whenever I'm supervising the guys. I let them be who they are, unless it's a problem. So some guys like to go out and they like to talk to people, and they like to do more community oriented things, and they like to go out and check buildings and do building checks on churches and businesses. Some guys like to go out and talk to kids. I mean, it's really all in who that individual police officer is. And then some guys are just ground pounders, and they want to go out and, find somebody to arrest for drugs or whatever the case may be. But I let them be who they are until it becomes an issue, and then maybe they're just not interacting well with the public. Then I'll step in. But man, for the most part, I let them be who they are. I want free thinkers. I don't want a bunch of guys who are going to fall in line or try to be something they're not. I want guys who are going to come out and do with the job what they think the job is, not what I want them to think the job is.
Sure. And I think, honestly, that is the reasonable way to handle things. And everybody's going to carry the job differently and act differently under different situations. But in today's times, the old style of hardcore policing, I don't see it as being a beneficial tactic more so than community oriented policing. As a supervisor, what are you guys doing for your command structure to keep mental health in check and just overall morale?
So I think by allowing them to be that free thinker, I think what that does, it establishes a level of accountability, individual accountability with each other. Like, hey, this is what you wanted, this is what you got. Here's some advice based on my experience. If you do this, X, Y, and Z, this is normally what's going to happen. So we learn from it and we move on. So I try to take that back seat and let them learn in real time with the job. And then obviously if something traumatic happens, all hands are on deck at that point. And that person is priority number one. If something traumatic, like a shooting or something, which knock on wood, that hasn't happened in quite some time here, but that person's priority number one, and we do whatever we can to take care of them. And then we will reward the individual officer for their performance, not so much on a productivity level, but on what is your standard of good as a supervisor? And productivity isn't necessarily mine. I don't care if you go out and write 50 tickets. The guy who goes out and he helps an old lady across the road or helps an old lady bag groceries, to me, is more important than the guy who goes out and writes 25 tickets. I mean, that's just who I am. That's what I believe. So I try to instill that in the guys as much as I can, just by leading by example. But again, if they want to go out and do those things, then that's the job, and I'm not going to stop them. But hopefully, through time and maturity and age, everybody kind of shifts that direction. And that's the department that I'm ahead of in the coming years, which it pretty much is now. But every once in a while you get a guy that's, like I said, full of piss and vinegar that wants to go out and burn the roads up. But and you gotta love them. But man, it's tickets. I just don't like tickets.
They're few and far between, but when you get them honest.
Right.
So throughout your time as an officer, how has your mentors prepared you to take on this role as chief deputy?
That's a good question.
On a mental side, let's re-ask that. On a mental structure side, how has your mentors prepared you to take on this role of a leadership, knowing that you have X amount of guys under you that are your responsibility, and if something bad were to happen, that you have to step in and make sure that they follow through those steps to process things correctly and check off those mental boxes coming back into the job?
So for me, back in 2014, I was involved in a pretty traumatic incident where a man lost his life. And, the department I was working for at the time, it was all new. Everybody's learning. Everybody's kind of flying by the seat of their pants sometimes. And, you don't expect these things to happen. Complacency sets in, and then it happens. And then you kind of got to figure out how to handle it in real time without having really any training or experience. So my incident, the handling of it, sometimes I think about it and I wish things would have been different for me. That I would have been handled a little better. And through knowing that, I've applied that to my job as supervisor now, where if something happens, I don't care what I'm in your corner. I mean, unless you do something wrong, I'm there for you, and whatever you need, I'm there for you, just based on my experience. As far as being the man I am today, I think a lot of that is, I have to give credit to my parents. I mean, my dad was in law enforcement for years. When I was a kid, things happened, and he wasn't in law enforcement anymore. He was always the community guy, treat people how you want to be treated.
Sure.
My mom wouldn't say a negative word about anybody, and just the sweetest lady you ever met in your life. But growing up in that environment around a lot of the law enforcement officers that I did, they molded me to be the man that I am today. And then I've worked under people that I didn't agree with, and I've worked under people that I absolutely did agree with. But being in the position I am now under Sheriff Ferris, he allows me the opportunity to lead the way that I believe. He doesn't try to micromanage me. He doesn't try to choose my methods. He trusts me, and man, that's all I can ask for. And I think from a mental health perspective, I think our department's in a really good place right now. Just based on that, kind of being the mother of the department, if you will, the nice guy, the shoulder to lean on. You can come into my office and talk to me anytime and feel safe doing it. And I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to pick on you. And when you leave the office, we'll never talk about it again unless you want to. So as a supervisor, I think it's very important to invite that kind of interaction with your men. When you have to get onto them, you get onto them, you do it in a healthy way. You're not a jerk, and you move on. It's just providing a good climate for law enforcement, I think, is a very overlooked aspect of the job as a supervisor. I think a lot of guys get caught up in their own career, and they try to apply their experiences too much to the individual officer, and it never works, man. You got to let people be who they are, and sometimes just reel them in or guide them a little bit throughout the way, and it will work out for you. Just don't try to make them be something they're not.
You made several good points there, and very, very truthful. And I think one of the biggest things that stuck out was, just having that open door policy of a judgment-free zone, of where they don't have to second guess going into your office, and feeling safe enough to talk about whatever. I mean, those safe places don't come here, there, and everywhere. And 90% of the time, they all come with judgment.
Absolutely.
And it's not even, I wouldn't even go as far to say that most of the people actually mean the judgment that they cast, because of just as much shit as we give each other anyways. But at the end of the day, that guy's going to go home and think about that interaction, and that's going to play in his head over and over again of, man, I'm not going to go back to him next time because, that made me feel some type of way, and I don't want to do that anymore.
A big philosophy for me, dude, is and none of my guys struggle with this, just to be clear, but when I want them to be able to come to me for answers, because if they can come to me for answers, they're not going to look for them in the bottom of a bottle. So that's a big philosophy of mine.
Absolutely.
Try to be an answer for them, and if I don't know, best believe I'm going to look for it. I'm going to find it, and I'm going to tell you. But just to be there for them, man. If you're there for them and you have the answer, they're not going to look for it elsewhere.
And I think that's a common thing for most of the older style of law enforcement, was to just suppress everything and find alternate means of drowning that, per se. And and I would even go as far to say is most of us still do that still today, in some way, shape, or form. But it's not it's not the way anymore. And, we've all lost people to that side of things in the mental health world, and you wrap that in with substances, say alcohol, it only amplifies it and keeps amplifying it until you can't hide it any longer. And there's not enough people out there that choose to step in anymore and say enough is enough, and you've got to quit this crap before you end up 6 feet down.
Yeah.
And more of the older guys are finding themselves in that situation as we keep going. And I'm sure you are just as much as I am, but I'm tired of losing friends.
Oh yeah.
And I'm tired of attending those funerals, especially over something that definitely can be helped in the right way.
Young men.
It's crazy. And, and I say the older generation of law enforcement, but help, that's our generation of law enforcement now. Like, we're not we're still the young ones, but we're not at the same time. I mean, you got 14 years under you, and I've been away from it for 8 years now, going on 30 years old. So, I mean, we're not the new guys coming in. So, just to continue, but what in your department, we'll kind of keep on the department things for just a minute, but in your department, on guys coming in, what kind of evaluations are you guys doing to explore the mental health side before you ever make a new hire? I mean, aside from a psychological exam, what else are you guys looking at before you take on a new hire?
Man, my interview process starts the day you come into the office for an application.
I figured you'd say that.
Somebody comes into the office for an application, and the secretary says, somebody's here to get an application. I make it a point to come out there and see you. And there are a few things I want to see. I'm not going to say it on here. You can probably imagine what they are.
I can read your mind.
I want to see how you represent yourself in that moment. We'll just put it that way.
Sure.
And then the interview process continues every time I see you. Do you submit the application? Do you follow instructions when you submit the application? And then I might not be good at it by any means, but I look at someone's application, what they've put into those boxes, and I'm evaluating. I'm doing the best that I can to evaluate what that person's personality is. And then we have an interview, and then I want to see what their personality is in the interview. And it's very easy sometimes to read in those interviews. And then obviously it moves on to a physical. After all of this is taking place after a physical and a written test, obviously, but then there's the psychological evaluation, and we look at those with great scrutiny because we don't want anybody to develop mental health issues when they become a police officer, but we dang sure don't want to hire people with mental health issues already before they even become a police officer.
Right.
Because it's not going to help it. It's not, law enforcement is not going to help your mental health condition. Going out and thinking that helping people is going to improve your psyche, I promise there's so much more to it than that. Law enforcement, it takes a piece every day and it never gives it back.
No.
So that's the big thing, man. I evaluate people from the time I meet them, from the time that I hire them,
And that's how it should be. And, you go back to law enforcement isn't going to solve your mental health problems. And it's not, because you're going to see tenfold of what you've seen prior to getting into law enforcement. And, even things that don't even seem bad are bad.
Mm-hmm.
in law enforcement, they're just bad. It doesn't matter if it's, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, you're there on the worst day, and it's never a walk in the park. It could, just going from your unattended deaths all the way to the most brutal. None of it's a piece of cake, and you're always going to take that home with you in some way.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Quadcast.
Remember, breaking stigma doesn't stop when the episode ends. We're building a movement, and you're a part of it. Stay strong, stay aware, and stay connected.
And this is the Quadcast, signing out.